Seated. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Christ is risen.
Truly is risen.
Christos anesti.
Christos anesti.
Amasi kam. Just going to highlight here. This is the last Sunday of the Paschal season. So that greeting is the last Sunday we're doing it for the season. And a number of things that we have seen and heard during the season are being put away until next year. The Paschal candle, the singing of Christ is risen at the beginning of liturgy, the large cross with the cloth draped on that, that's all being put away. So this week, we mark it on Thursday, is the Feast of the Ascension. And we get into the next stage of this story that we've had since Holy Week. So that's what we have to prepare for. And to highlight the practice of our parish is we will have a liturgy for that Feast of the Ascension Wednesday night at 6. So come for that, and we'll do this next step. So on this Sunday, we always hear the story about the man born blind and has his sight restored to him by Jesus Christ. We'll look at that story in a moment. But a story that came up yesterday. So yesterday, a number of men from the parish went down to the monastery of St. Gregory Palamas in Hayesville. It's near Ashland. And part of what was nice about that trip was not just going to the monastery, but of course it was about an hour and a half car ride each way. So we had the opportunity to talk and share things during the car ride. And one of the things that came up towards the end of our return here is a story that seemed to fit with the gospel reading. It was something that Jim Huebner asked me during the car ride. He said, "Father, did you ever meet Father Peter Gilchrist?" There was a whole story about that I'll get to in a moment. So for those of you familiar with the Orthodox Church, Father Peter was part of a group of evangelical Christians who converted and became Orthodox in the 1980s. And as a result of that, founded within our archdiocese, with the blessing of His Eminence Metropolitan Philip, with Christ's blessed memory, our Department of Missions and Evangelism, and was a person who really could present the faith in the church and was instrumental in the foundings of dozens of missions that are now parishes within our archdiocese. That's what I know him more for. Probably the thing that you know him more for is the Orthodox Study Bible. If you look at the front of the Orthodox Study Bible, Father Peter is the general editor. So he coordinated all the efforts of all of the bishops and scholars who prepared that Bible so that we have our own Bible with study notes about the Orthodox faith. But in answering Jim's question, I said, well, yes, I did know Father Peter. And actually, as a priest in what at the time was a mission, Father Peter and I had a lot of interaction with one another. I first met him in 2003. And that was before I even came here. I came here in 2008. But he was part of my first few years here at St. Luke. But we had gotten to a point where 2011, beginning of 2012, we were just kind of treading water. For some of our parishioners who've been here a little more than 6 years, 7 years back, when we were in the space of Chagrin Falls. 2 rented rooms they were in a business building. And I've been talking to Father Peter about this. And what Father Peter and I had reached was, we had this conversation in the spring of 2012. He said, "Father, I think I just need to come to your parish in the fall. And we'll arrange a weekend, we'll do a retreat, I'll speak, we'll get the word out, we'll see what we can do to kind of get things really kind of kick-started there." And he said, "I think we should do that in September." And he told me, he said, "There's something I need to check on first. Call me back in a month." So this was in May. June comes. I call him back. And he was very calm about this. And he was very direct. He said, Father, I'm not coming to your parish in September. The cancer that I had that was in remission has come back. And my doctor says I have maybe a month to live. And I'm very sorry about this. So I kind of flummoxed my way through it. Well, sorry to hear that. That's too bad. Thank you, Father Peter, and hung up the phone. Now, the timing of that also was, I had checked the mail from the church. There was a letter from the Archdiocese. And I opened this letter, and it said, congratulations, St. Luke, a little tiny community in 2 rented rooms, is now officially a parish of the Archdiocese. You will no longer receive mission report from the Archdiocese. You are now responsible for providing your giving as a parish to help support the Archdiocese. I went, oh no. And I looked at the budget, because at that moment I went, oh no. And I looked at the budget, and my rough calculation was the parish is going to run out of money by the end of the calendar year. So, that's kind of the segue here. We're going to set the story aside, come back to it. Let's look at the gospel reading that we have for today. So this is another one of those healing stories that we hear so often in these gospel readings. And in this story, it is Jesus healing a man born blind. And if you kind of dig into this, and the nuance that the fathers give us is that the man was born without eyes. It's not just, okay, we're going to kind of heal this thing that's broken. It's we have to replace something that's missing. And the context for this is that just before Jesus and the apostles encounter this man, they're in the temple in Jerusalem. And they've been in this debate with the Pharisees. And Jesus makes this statement to the Pharisees, basically saying, well, I'm God. And they've gotten angry, and they are collecting stones to stone him to death, because it's blasphemy. So, discretion being the better part of valor, Jesus and the apostles leave the temple quickly. And it's when they're walking out of the temple that they see this man born blind. And there are a number of pieces and nuances in there. But something that Jesus says is, I'm doing the work of the Father, and I need to do something with this man to demonstrate the work of the Father. And he heals the man. So it's that thing where he makes the clay, anoints the man's eyes. He doesn't ask the man if he wants to be healed. He just kind of does this thing to him and says, go outside the city. There's this pool of Siloam. Wash your eyes. So the man goes and does that. And after he's done that, he's healed. He can see. And he returns to where he was, outside the temple. Now what's interesting is if you're reading this gospel story carefully, Jesus has disappeared. And the bulk of that reading, Jesus is not there. It's what's happening with this man. So first he comes back, and the people that knew him, we hear his neighbors and the people that were used to seeing him outside the temple begging, they start asking this question. Isn't that the man who's blind, but he sees now? So they have this whole thing. Is that who it is, or are we mistaken? And the man says, no, I'm the guy. Yeah, I was blind. I used to be out here begging. But I've been healed. And so those neighbors and people are astounded. And they ask, well, how did this happen? Who healed you? And he just tells them, well, this man named Jesus anointed my eyes and said, wash them. Man named Jesus. So in the understanding of the blind man who's now healed, Jesus was just this man that did this thing. Well, of course, there's all this fussing and concern because it's the Sabbath and you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath and run around and all of this. And Jesus healing the man is work done on the Sabbath. So the crowd says, well, we need to give you to the religious authorities, the Pharisees, and they can deal with this because there's something wrong here. So he's given to the Pharisees. And there's this whole back and forth with the Pharisees. Same questions. How did this happen? Who did it? what do you say about this man who healed him? So the second statement from this man. Well, he's a prophet. Somehow God's involved with this. He's a prophet. He's not a man named Jesus. Not just a man named Jesus. He's a prophet. And they have this back and forth. And they do this thing of like, well, tell us how this happened. And the man, being kind of snarky, says, well, I already told you. Do you want me to tell you again because you want to become one of his followers? Which makes the Pharisees angrier. But the third thing that the man here says in this, who did this? How did this happen? And the man who's healed says, well, he's a man of God. So you see we're getting this progressive thing. A man named Jesus is a prophet. He's a man of God. And we hear that the Pharisees are so angry about this because it's dealing with Jesus whom they're already mad at, that they basically kick the man out of the temple and basically say, you can't be part of us anymore. And let him go. So that's the bulk of the reading. But then the man encounters Jesus again. It's Jesus returning again at the bookend of the story. So they have some conversation there. And Jesus asks him, do you want to follow the Son of God? And the man says, well, of course, but who is that? And Jesus says, well, you've seen him and he is me. And there's some linguistic things in there. There's this whole phrase that occasionally comes up where Jesus will say, I am. And that is very specifically a name for God. We hear this back in the Old Testament with Moses. And when Moses is told by God to go and free his people from Egypt, Moses says, well, who do I tell the Egyptians sent me? He says, tell them I am sent. So this is understood very much as a name for God. And we hear that the man who's healed says, I believe and worship him. So that's the fourth piece on this. A man named Jesus, a prophet, a man of God, and more specifically, the Son of God. So in this story, it's about the man's progressive understanding of what happened and how it happened and who was instrumental in it happening to him. And so it took all of this back and forth with all of these people for him to kind of sort it out in his head and finally meeting Jesus Christ to do that. So the lesson that we can have there is the thing that often involves us looking at the hand of God. It's not necessarily something that comes in the moment, but it is something that takes place over time. Well, we can go back to my story about Father Peter. So, of course, I shared this story beginning of June 2012, finding out that Father Peter was sick. And early July, hearing that he died. And with God's blessing, being able to be a part of his funeral, which was in Indianapolis. He's actually buried in Bloomington, Indiana. But it kind of leads still to that question. Father Peter wasn't there to come help. We still have this thing. Congratulations, your parish. Please start sending checks. And how that played out. I didn't know what to do. I really did not know what to do. And so it was a prayer that I offered God. I don't see what's happening here. I don't see what's being involved here. And so it really was that sort of thing. You put me here as a priest. This mission, now a parish, has been here and continues. What's supposed to happen? And part of what I recognized in that is that a lot of my effort to that point was, here's the book, here's the formula, here's the approach, here's the checklist. If I just do these things as a priest, everything will work out. And in that moment, I realized I've been doing that God has allowed this parish to continue, but it's really not going anywhere. And what is that all about? And so that became the prayer that I offered to God. I'm here, parish is here. What are we doing? And recognizing what I should recognize. God, this is your parish. It's not my parish. And you are going to have to guide this parish, and you are going to have to make this work. I'm here as the instrument and the tool, and I will work hard to do what you've asked me to do, but I can't see what to do here. I said, here you go. Whatever you want to do, let me know. I'll do it. Well, there's an obvious outcome to this story. We're in this building. It's more than a decade later. But an interesting thing happened. In August, we had a visitor. He's one of our parish shut-ins. Some of you know Victor. And Victor came for liturgy, and then he went home. He didn't stay for coffee hour. He didn't talk to me. But he emailed me that afternoon. Father, I'd like to meet for lunch. I was the guy that came for liturgy. I said, oh, okay. And I sent him back. I said, well, when would you like to have lunch? He said, tomorrow. Which kind of blew me away. Most people are like, well, I'll do it later in the week. I can do it next week. You have a little back and forth. It doesn't necessarily work out. Tomorrow. So I said, okay. We arranged. We met at a restaurant in Solon. We're having lunch. And I've had so many lunches like this before, where people were curious about the parish. I'd have lunch with them. They'd say, well, that's nice, Father. And we'd never see them again. And so I was like, okay, well, let's see where this goes. So I was ready to just kind of do my typical, this is St. Luke, this is what's going on. And Victor just flat out told me, it's like, I'm going to start coming to your parish. It's like, your parish is my parish now. And I was like, okay, well, if that's what you're going to do, that's fine. And we'll make it happen. So he started coming. And that was the first of many people who started coming during that end of 2012. Paid the bills. Now the thing is, we can get caught in these expectations and anticipations of how many people show up or how many stick around. And we can have an expectation here, but in terms of what God has given us, it might be more like here. But we have to do what the blind man did. Look at the history. Look for where God has moved in the life of this parish. In terms of progress. And it is that sort of thing, where we look and we see. God has continued to work in this parish. And God has continued to bring people to this parish. And even with that particular year, I'll do the money thing, because people think about the money thing. We make budget every year. It's never this thing where we're biting our nails in December saying, are we going to be able to pay the bills at the end of the year? We always make a budget. I never worry about the money. I'm careful and I'm a good steward about money and talking about money. But I don't worry. Are we going to pay the bills or not? Because it's provided for. But we don't necessarily see that every time. So it is. We have to keep telling stories about our parish. And we have to keep telling stories about how it has advanced. And we have to understand that that is the work of God in this particular parish community. And that He's given us work to do. That's part of that progression that the blind man had. And that's part of the progression that we have as a parish community. So, I'll wrap with that. We'll continue our divine liturgy. And for a final time this season, Christ is risen.
Truly He is risen.